Alistair Begg of Truth for Life, heard daily and weekends on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, what can we expect during the next half of 2023? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. I do have a line open. Would love to hear from you today. If you've got a question and or a comment, the number to call is 1-877-913-5357. 1-877-913-5357. You can also go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. There is a question and answer section at the top of the website. You can go through and go check out the website if you haven't. We completely redid it, and hopefully you'll find some resources there that can help you kind of figure things out. And I'm always available, though, from the Q&A or email info@prudentmoney.com. That's info@prudentmoney.com. However we can help you, we want to do so. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. 1-877-913-5357. So it is unbelievable to me, and I'm sure to you too, if you've sat back and thought about this today, there is one more day of June, which is tomorrow, then we start up on the second half of the year. I mean, already 6 months, a half of year, we're beyond the half, or going to cross the halfway mark on Saturday. And that just is unbelievable to me. I mean, of course, this is nothing that you haven't heard before. You know, they always say how you need to slow down and enjoy the moments as you go through the day, because time goes by so fast, which is so very true. And I think that time when you have a son or a daughter that's a senior in high school, that goes by with turbos on it. Time does. Unbelievable how quickly that goes by. And, you know, here we are. I've already had one in college, but my youngest, 2 boys, my youngest will be starting up at the University of Arkansas. And that's literally maybe 40, like 30 or 40 days away. So, and I'm sure that will be here by tomorrow. But there's some significance to arriving at the middle of the year and looking back to January. Thinking back some of the conversations that you and I've had together about a brand new year, the symbolism of a brand new year, and what is not working in my life. What could I do differently? What could I change? And of course, we're a lot more motivated during that first week or so of the year. And we're writing goals down, writing down habits we want to adapt, habits we want to change, habits we want to get rid of, and just trying to grow and be a better steward of what God has blessed us with. I mean, at the end of the day, the conversations we're having is about that. And so I'll be the first to admit that, I mean, I was pretty good about really thinking through what I wanted 2023 to look like and to be like. And if I could if I was being totally transparent, which I like to think that I am, halfway through, I don't know that I've been as successful as I wanted to be. In fact, I know of a couple of habits, a couple of things that I thought were important, haven't really adopted them. So I've been looking over the past week at where I want to be, or would have liked to have been at the halfway mark. And so now I look at the halfway mark and I look at the end of the year and I think to myself, okay, what do I want that to look like? Because there's some symbolism that we're halfway there. So I would really encourage you to sit down, draw out a game plan, figure out what's been working this first 6 months and what needs to change. What can you do differently? And make some changes. And of course, that's the great thing about your prayer life, your relationship with Christ, is that God is always there to walk you through the path you have to take. Because really, a lot of what we aspire to be, growth is not necessarily easy. It's not until you get on the other side and you really benefit through whatever caused you to grow, habits to change, whatever. But you get to that point where you feel like, this is something that I've really, God has really guided me through. And the whole process, in my opinion, just brings you closer to God. I know what I was going to say a second ago. I had kind of lost my train of thought as I was talking, that the things we want to change a lot of times are the things we fear. And that's the key, is to getting past that fear, because you've got really one of two choices. This is pretty easy. We can focus and filter the events of our life through fear or ego or what's in it for me, or any of those types of emotions, pride, guilt, greed, whatever. Or we have the opportunity to filter everything through God. And we're constantly, day in, day out, we're choosing in every moment. Are we going to filter through God or fear? And that's the big opportunity that we have, because the greatest thing about that is that we all have a choice. We can make our own mind up. That's the only thing that we can control, is what filter are we going to live our lives through, down to every minute, every moment, every special moment that we get. And that's something else we don't want to lose sight of. But is to really decide, you know what, I'm not going to go through my ego on this. I'm going to go through and see this as God would have me see it. It's a simple but powerful way of living. Another one is, am I going to show grace, or am I going to let them have it? Am I going to let them know what my thoughts are, how important I think I am, or am I going to show grace? I've always loved the concept of grace. But it's just taking these little steps, and these little steps build up to big steps. And the next thing you know, you find that, I'm living a grace-filled life. So I hope I haven't been rambling too much. This has really been on my mind, and want to encourage you not so much to not waste the 6 months you have in front of you, to not waste the time you've got in front of you. every day is a blessing. Every day is a gift. Every moment's a gift. Every moment's a teaching moment, that we have the blessing of learning something that God wants us to know. And it's just some very powerful stuff. 1-877-913-5357. Well, it's so funny, when I prepare for a show, you should see everything I want to talk about today. And then I start talking about something, and I start driving off the road, so to speak, gearing off course. But I don't think I was gearing off course. I think this is something I felt led to talk about. But it is always funny because I've got now tons of things to talk about next week. There's always something to talk about. But let's talk about and get some ideas out on the table of what the next 6 months could look like. First 6 months seems like, based on if you completely believe, interpret data like the government politicians want you to, that everything's going pretty good. Economy's good, stock market's good, everything's behind us. And I had a dear friend of mine ask me to watch a JP Morgan webinar. And I thought, you're lucky that we're as close as we are, because I wouldn't do that just for anybody. So anyway, I watched this JP Morgan webinar. And, generally speaking, and this is after 31 years of being in the business and watching these, how pop culture finance describes things and gives out advice, and really what's at the core. And I'll get to this on the other side of the break. 1-877-913-5357. This is Bob Brooks. Stick around and be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org. At PastorChuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at PastorChuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, PastorChuck.org.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
What do we do when people mistreat us? How do we respond? If we listen to the voices of the world around us, we will be no different than they are. God seems to have a different plan.
Dr. David Jeremiah continues his series, The Tender Warrior, next time on Turning Point.
Weekday mornings at 9 o'clock here on KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio. 1-877-913-5357 is the number to call. Talking about being at the midway part of the year and what could we have in front of us. So I'm watching this back to my JP Morgan, the thing I was talking about before we went to break. JP Morgan and had a webinar, and they started off talking about, well, we really feel like a recession we will have a recession. But, the reality is everybody thinks we're going to have a recession. And everybody thinks that it'll probably be, well, it was supposed to be at the probably middle of the year. We didn't make that. Probably going to be towards the end of the year. Then I saw one today from UBS that, no, it's going to be in 26. So it leaves me scratching my head a little bit. The only thing that I do know is that when everyone is expecting something, it usually doesn't happen. The contrarian look at the way investments in the economy work. James Rickards came on the program in January, actually, of this year. He's a New York Times best-selling author, forecaster, has written many books. And I had said the same thing to him about what I just said about when everybody believes something is going to happen, usually doesn't. He goes, I totally believe that's true. The only difference is that everybody sees this as a mild recession. No big deal. What I'm thinking and what I'm forecasting is a pretty big recession. Nobody is really seeing that coming. Oh, that was interesting. And what's even more interesting about the big stock brokerage houses like a J.P. Morgan, when they give out behind all the information, the forecasting, everything that they talk about, there's always three things. Stocks are always a good buy, no matter what's going on. No matter if I'm losing tons of money, you should be buying stocks. I'm a long-term investor, so I shouldn't change anything ever. And the worst is behind us. And that's really the basis of the absolute truths that Pop Culture Finance runs on. And it's an opinion that I think, and not an absolute truth. I've always said that there is one absolute truth when it comes to money, that there are no absolute truths. Let that settle in for a second. But, everybody does expect, in fact, in this webinar, they talked about, we do expect a recession, but we think it will be good for stocks. And, imagine the shock on my face that a recession would be good for stocks. So what's interesting, though, is that the index of leading indicators, which is a economic indicator, it's made up of a lot of different components, has predicted every single recession 100% accuracy since 1959 and suggests, forecasts that that's going to happen, that we're going to see a recession. So, once again, I think that just like inflation, people are able to absorb it. A mild recession, I think that we can absorb. The thing, though, that's missing, as I sat through and watched this particular webinar, is that a lot of what they're basing it on, they're very positive forecasts, is history, and they're not factoring in things like politics, like corporate greed. I mean, all the things that agenda. We've got a presidential election coming up. So, but if you add all that in, it starts to make it a lot more complicated. And of course, the more you do, and Pop Culture Finance doesn't want complicated. At the end of the day, what they were really trying to talk about is that everybody's got a lot of cash sitting in money markets. and money markets are moving out of these big stock brokerage houses, and they're looking for places where they're getting the highest rate. So what J.P. Morgan's really kind of the background of what they were talking about was, hey, you need to get the cash invested because I think cash isn't going to do as well as stocks and bonds going forward. Another shocker. So I think that calling for a recession right now is extremely, I do think we'll have one, but I think it's very complicated as to when it will happen. Now, one thing that could drive a more serious recession is interest rates. And Federal Reserve Board Chair Jerome Powell, about a month ago, talked about inflation going down, probably don't have to be as aggressive with interest rates, just very positive and upbeat. The market loved it, market went up. And then less than 3 to 4 weeks later, he talks to Congress and he has this different tone and he's concerned. And if you listen to it and read between the lines, there was a little bit more of an aggressive nature about interest rates and raising interest rates. Then yesterday he talked about, I think it was yesterday, he talked about, well, probably where there's a good chance that we're considering raising interest rates in back-to-back months, which would have a little bit more of an effect on the economy, a negative effect on the economy, than if he spread them out. Market initially didn't like that, but really didn't. I think that the market really thinks that this is going to be nothing. But it makes me wonder, because here is the problem that nobody wants to talk about. And that is twofold: how complex this inflation has become, and what do we really need, and does as interest rates, raising interest rates, going to solve everything? And we've talked about this in the program many times, but I think it's worth going back through and with this as a backdrop, is that the inflation problem we have is we'll call it in two parts. The first part is the parts of inflation that will react to interest rate hikes. And that's worked. I've seen prices in different areas start coming down. And you also have to consider the parts of the economy that aren't necessarily affected by raising interest rates, and that's causing inflation. So we have this dual inflation type environment. The problem is that Chairman Powell is going to have to raise interest rates a lot higher. I think this is what he's signaling, than we might think. And by doing so, create the kind of environment that would kill off this final type of inflation to get everything back under control. And that would be going through a little bit more of a severe recession. That would be more troubles with the stock market, more troubles with the bond market. I just don't think that he's going to be able to, and I think it's unrealistic to think he's going to give you the magic pill and you lose 20 pounds. I think it's going to take some tough decisions to be made. And a lot of that is covered by agenda, politics, and everything else that goes into it. But it's interesting that there's part of the economy that's not directly affected by interest rates, but indirectly, because you raise interest rates, puts pressure on the economy, it weakens the economy goes down, and then the components of inflation start to fade. And that is what I think that we're going to see, and I think that we're going to see here in the second half. That's not necessarily good news, bad news. It's just an opinion. if you stick with keeping the idea of risk and risk management, you should be fine. That's just the key to it. If you got any questions about that, please make sure you go to prudentmoney.com and send us an email. I'll be happy to answer any questions about that. But it really does come down to risk management and how effective you can be making sure you're not taking, or you are comfortable with the risk that you're taking. How about that? We'll say it that way. Comfortable with the risk that you're taking. This is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.